Say that I don't know how long this is going to go on because we got a storm going on in the area. So I'm going to cover as much as I can. I don't know if I'm going to get 2 or 3 minutes in or if I'm going to actually be able to talk, for the full duration. I got one of the dogs that when it starts to rain, especially when it starts to thunder, she wants me to cater towards her, take care of her and so forth. That's normally my wife's dog, but when it thunders, she becomes my dog. So she may scratch on the door. So we're going to try to. This is very important. So if I have to do it again next week, then we'll do that. But like I said, we're dealing with some very bad weather, and so I don't know how long the broadcast is going to go on. But I guess that just tells me how important this talk is going to be for you guys. It's actually going to be very powerful. I've talked about it for a few weeks as we led up to it. So we're going to go and get started because, like I said, I don't know how much time I have due to the weather. We got thunder, lightning, blah, blah, blah. So we may even lose power depending upon what takes place. So let's see how far we go. We're going to be talking about elite states. We're going to be talking about, when I say elite states, we're talking, Neville Goddard had a principle called living in the end, basically getting into the right state of what it is that you wanted to manifest. So when I talk about getting into state, what I'm going to be doing is telling you how to personify, get into the ideal state of the person that you want to be to or have. But we're going to come from a lesson from probably a very strange place, seemingly. We're going to be talking about, and again, let me preface by saying this. Even though I'm going to be using the allegory, the metaphors of Jesus and the possessed man, that's not going to be, as it were, a religious lesson. From Genesis to Revelation, this is your story. So what we're going to be doing is basically telling you how to use the principles of Scripture in a practical everyday life, how your mind works from a quantum physics, quantumetics, quantum mechanics, cybernetics point of view. We're going to be taking like I said, we're going to be using Scripture as the allegory. But like I said, we're going to be talking about how you work. And you're not who you think you are. You're actually so much more than who you believe that you are. The problem is we've purchased into what we believe about ourselves, what others have said about us, what society has said about us. And so what I want to do is break us from that shell of limitation and let you know that you're a very powerful creator. And simply, I say simply, it's easier said than done. You need to clothe yourself in the identity of the person that you want to be to or have. So I'm going to take you through that. Like I said, we're going to be coming from Scripture. We're going to be coming from Mark 5, chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And again, this is not a biblical lesson, but I'm using Bible to teach you who it is that you are from a energy system, vibrational system, spiritual being system. So let's go and delve into it again. Because of it's thundering and lightning outside, I don't know how long I have, so I'm going to cover as much as I can. And what we don't cover this week, I may just do the whole thing over again next week. But let's see how far we get. Okay, we're talking, when I say elite states means this: embody living in the end. Now, I'm not going to just leave you out there and you try to figure out what it means to embody living in the end. I'm going to discuss what that means for you as an individual. Now, understand this. A lot of times when we think about manifestation, when we talk about living in the end, materialization, and so forth, we keep thinking of it from a magical, mystical, miraculous type of thing that happens only to a few people. You're doing this every day. You're doing this morning, noon, and night. I had a dream last night, and I was seemingly like in an airport, but it was like a big mall type area. And it was really a simulation of life. And what was happening was I was moving through, walking through, and there were these different events taking place. And some of the events, like there was a guy arguing with a female, and they started kind of getting a little roughhousing, as it were. And in my everydayness, I wanted to intervene, but Spirit said, that's not your business. You're to move on into what it is that you're to be, do, or have. A lot of times, we're called to be something, do something, have something. And we want to operate from the same level that we've done previously. And we keep wondering why we're getting the same results. But Spirit is calling us to a higher level of existence. And we're going to cover that. So, like I said, we're going to be talking from the book of Mark, chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And this is where Jesus encounters, he goes into this area and he encounters this man that's demon possessed. Now, we say, well, what does this have to do with manifestation? We'll talk about that. We'll get there. But in encountering this man, Jesus inquired with the man. He says, the spirit or the voice within the man, he says, what is your name? And he said, my name is Legion, because we are many. Now, they say that in Scripture, this man had an unclean spirit. But understand this. When we're talking about angels and demons, we're really talking about influence. So an angel, a demon, is a messenger from, whether towards your good or towards error. So when we're talking about a messenger, this man had error messages. These were, and again, you got to understand, 2,000 years ago, they did not understand psychology. Why is this relevant? This is relevant because I told you there was a thunderstorm going on and my dog is trying to scratch on the door. So I'm going to open the door and kind of let her out. Normally just close things out. So, but because it's a thunderstorm, she's probably going to scratch until I finish this broadcast. I don't know how long I have with the broadcast because power could go out. But let me quickly open the door, bring the dog in, and comfort her as I'm talking to you. I can do both. I can multitask, psych. But let's see what happens. Go. Okay, so don't know if you're going to hear it. Come here, come here, come here. Come here, I can't play with you. Okay, so what happens is when we have thunderstorms and so forth, and the youngest dog, both of them are Yorkshire Terriers, when she hears thunder, she runs to me. Now, normally 99.9% of the time, she's my wife's dog. But in the rare cases that there's thunder, so right now she's kind of at my legs, but let's talk about this. Let me see. This is Izzy. So you can see she's a glamour star. So we're not going to keep talking about Izzy, but I'm going to let her sit on the lap right now. Okay, so we're talking about Jesus encountered, they said, this man with unclean spirits. And again, 2,000 years ago, thank you, 2,000 years ago, they didn't have psychology. So why is that relevant? The man basically was dealing with what he was focusing his energy on. Now, understand this. When we're talking about spirits, whether it be we're talking about angels, we're talking about demons, we're talking about mindset. So when we're talking about a man with unclean spirits, we're talking about somebody that's focusing on what it is that they don't want to have. You're talking about somebody that's been encountered by an angel. You're talking about somebody that's moving in the direction of what it is that they want to be to have. So where's your thoughts? Now, why is this relevant in living in the end? When we talk about Jesus, apart from the religious figure, Jesus, the name means salvation. And I'll talk about that in a second. It also means I am. So when we're talking about I am, this is you. What is it that you're linking yourself to? So when we say, if we're operating from a place of unclean spirit, in having a conversation about what it is that we don't want, and that's continuously our conversation, then what happens is we bring about the materialization or the manifestation of our predominant words, actions, and deeds. This man was causing chaos. We would call him a rebel, a troublemaker, back when. And so, they would try to bind him and so forth, and they just couldn't hold him down because his focus, his energy. And Jesus, we'll get into this, but Jesus basically spoke to that negative spirit and said, be gone. And so they went into something that the farmers really weren't supposed to be dealing with. They went into a herd of swine, pigs. Now, if you know anything about the Jewish culture, they didn't deal with swine. They weren't supposed to eat swine, but these people were farming swine. We'll talk about the relevance of that. But again, first and foremost, we have to understand that Jesus is your divine consciousness. I am. This is you. Now, The important thing about understanding I am, the other name for Jesus is salvation. Whatever you're giving your attention to. Joseph Murphy said this to Lindo, my mentor. He said, listen, if you want a hamburger, okay, so a hamburger is the end result. You're hungry. You said, man, I'm hungry. After I finish this talk, I'm going to go down and have, I guess it will be lunch now because of the time. But the whole point is me going down and fulfilling that desire to eat is salvation. So why is this relevant? You may have a desire to have more money. So the end desire, the salvation, the Jesus, is the fulfillment. I like to say that every man, woman is Mary awaiting Christ to conceive. Now, you know, the religious person says, what does he mean by that? From a metaphysical standpoint, what I'm saying is every man, every person. So when we're talking about man, we're talking male, female, made he, them. So in Scripture, when it says man, it speaks of the human race, humanity, not just man, the secular. Now, of course, Bible has been dominated by men, so you have a male God, so forth. This is why I say, you know, I may say God, I may say he, she, it, they, whatever. I'm going to put her down, but I'm sure she's going to be back. The whole point is, and for those who just came on the call, her is my Yorkshire Terrier. She gets terrified when there's lightning and thunder going on. So we're talking male, female, made he, them. So in this, we're talking about, there was a, when I looked up, it said a demon-possessed man. It really was a demon-possessed person. We don't know if it was male, female, but in Scripture, we say a demon-possessed man. That's okay. From Genesis to Revelation, this is your story. Now, you say, well, I'm not religious. This is one of the greatest books of spiritual psychology. So when you begin to, I speak, now, let me say this. If I was Muslim, right now I would be speaking from the Quran. If I was Buddhist, I would be speaking from some Buddhist literature. So I'm using the literature that I'm familiar with. But if you delved into any of these books and you started looking at the stories, whether I'm talking about a Hindu script, whatever, you're going to find deep-rooted meanings of the stories that are being told. So I'm telling you from this perspective, but again, what we're talking about is how you work at an energy level. Don't make this religious. Don't take this as a religious lesson. I'm really trying to get you to understand how your mind works, why you fail to manifest. When you say, well, I'm affirming and I'm at a deeper level, there's a legion of possibilities, and we're going to talk about that. So Jesus basically means the I am, or divine conscious salvation. What is it that you want? Okay, when we're talking about the demon-possessed man, this is the fragmented self, the ego self. It says that a double-minded person is unstable in all of his ways, her ways. Why is this relevant to the man that says he has a legion of possibilities? Actually, a legion doesn't even cover it. When we're talking about a legion, what is a legion? In the time that the Scripture was written, Rome was the dominating force. They were the superpower of that time. And they had different military arrangements and so forth. But one of the military arrangements was a legion. And a legion was a body of men, soldiers, that consisted of anywhere from 4,500 to 6,000 troops. So now what this really means really isn't about the 4,000. It's like Jesus saying forgive 70 times 7. He's not really talking about 490 times. He's saying repeatedly, over and over again, infinity is what he's saying. Likewise with the legion, you have within you a legion of possibilities. Now, this guy was focusing on the negative. So if you were focusing on the negative, you would have a negative, infinite possibilities of people that you can be, do, or have. If you're focused on the positive, it can also be a legion focused on the positive possibilities. What's going to happen when you're focused on what it is that you want to be, do, or have? Let's say that you want to start a business and you get into the mindset, you get into the vibration of somebody that wants to start a business. what's going to start happening is because you're in that vibrational state, don't get stuck on the demon-possessed man. It could have been an angelic-possessed man. It's the legion that we're talking about. You have within you infinite possibilities of who you can be or have. Now, we tend to get stuck on one track. We get fragmented, like this person, on this one track. And his one track was negativity, self-harm, harming others. So that was the possibilities. The infinite intelligence came across him, being, we talk about this person we call Jesus for the story. And he said, what is your name? He said, I'm Legion, because I am many. You're inundated with infinite possibilities of who you can be. Once you set your attention, we talk about this weekly, once you set your reticular activating system on, okay, I want to start a business. I want to get into better health, as it were. I want more money. I want a loving relationship. I want to lose weight. It doesn't matter what you set your attention on. What happens is now you cast out all of the possibilities. What we're going to do is briefly discuss how you make the transition from who you are to who you want to be. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about the legion of possibilities. When I read this, and it dawned on me that this wasn't talking solely about one man and his or her demon possession, but understand, like I said, they called it demon possession because you got to understand, they didn't have the psychology and the terms that we have, that we understand how mind works today. So it's like the Salem witch hunt. If you hypothetically went back to the past and you happen to take back to the past with you a big lighter, and so you're like, they're kind of wrapping their cigarettes or whatever they were smoking at that time, and you pull out this big lighter and you light it because they didn't have a word for big lighter. They've never seen a big lighter. To them, you would have become a witch. Stuff that we do today with technology. Some of the miracles that we see, Elijah laid his body on somebody and he started breathing in their mouth and they resuscitated, and they called that a miracle. Today we call that CPR. Jesus walked on water. We can get on water skis, and some people can barefoot and actually be pulled on water and walk on water. Jesus turned water into wine. Now we do have substance that we can pour into wine and it becomes wine. Take water and we can put a powder in all. What am I saying? I'm not discounting the miracles of Scripture. What I'm saying is that we're performing miracles every day. We're living from the state of miracles every day. Being able to get into a vehicle, being able to watch TV. When I was a kid, there was a program on and it was called The Jetsons. And The Jetsons was doing what I'm doing with you right now, talking on a camera, and being able to communicate back and forth. Hanna-Barbera saw this way back when, and they made a cartoon out of it. Now, for us, that was like something that we saw 1,000 years out. We did not see that technology would be designed to allow us to do these things. Understand, you're the miracle. I put a post out recently, and I said, often we're going and we're looking at this program, we're looking at this coach, we're looking at this teacher, we're looking at the next method to teach us how to embody, to get into state and so forth. But you got to understand, you're the miracle. Now, the miracle works this way, though. You start thinking about who it is that you want to be, do or have. You start picturing that. And I'm going to go on and get into the lesson because, like I said, you're like, man, that was the introduction. There's a lot to cover. The Legion is infinite possibilities. So we kind of touched on that. The Swine is physical manifestation. It's collapsing what we call reality. So you can send that possibility out to whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to go into something that's negative. This was a negative, as it were. The man had a negative spirit on him. So of course he could only say, You're sending your spirit out all the time, and it's being multiplied. The question is, what is it that you're sending out and what's being multiplied? Now, understand, we talk about the power of seeds. You can't send that negative energy out, for example, and think that I'm only going to affect one person. It's going to affect multiple people. So it's important that we're mindful of the energy. Your energy systems having a human experience. I know that we've been taught that we're this human being and we got this very small spirit within us. And that's just the opposite of who you are. You're a spiritual being and you're embodying this thing called a body. And when you transition from this thing called a body, spirit still goes on, still moves on because it's infinite. Now, science has proven this. We're called energy. Energy changes forms and so forth, but it can be distorted. This is your energy being having a human experience. So let's go on and move forward. Now, let's talk about moving from your current state to who it is that you want to be to have. And understand this, guys, please. Quit trying to... There's a saying, and it says this, that when there's a conflict between imagination and willpower, that 100% of the time, imagination is going to win out. Now you say, well, Coach, why is that relevant? It's relevant because you're trying to force change. Now, you're not trying to force the change that you're being at the moment. You say, well, that's just who I am. Exactly. And because there's a legion of possibilities, you can shift into any other possibility. Now, understand this when you make the shift. Everything in your world is going to look pretty much the same. People kind of give you the impression that, you make this shift and miraculously your whole world changes around you. It's often not that sudden. It's not that apparent. What happens is some things are going to change immediately, but you got to understand, because you're embodying this earth suit in this realm, most people are going to pretty much see you as they've always seen you. No matter how successful you become, no matter how wealthy you become, for example, when you go home to family, you're still little Johnny. You're still, we had Tiny Man was a boy that I knew growing up. You know what I'm saying? There was another boy called Stinky, and one day we had not seen Stinky for a couple of years. And I say, hey, how you doing, Stinky? I didn't, that's what we called him. I wasn't, criticizing him or anything. We called him Stinky. His mama called him Stinky. We called him Stinky. He says, my name is Carlos. So he made it clear to me that I was not to call him Stinky anymore. You understand what I'm saying? When you transition into another state, often those who see your outward appearance will still see the old you. Give you a point in case. Neville talks about him being a dancer. When he really started delving into practicing these spiritual principles and so forth, some people that knew Neville hadn't seen Neville for years. So they still saw Neville the dancer and whatever he did as a dancer and his lifestyle and so forth, they still saw that old person. And it's like often when I'm talking to one of my siblings, my sister in particular, she'll come across somebody that we knew growing up. And she's like, oh, so I just ran across such and such and they really want to contact you, blah, blah, blah. The challenge that I have with that is that the only thing that we can talk about is us going back 40 years and who we were 40 years ago. Now, I'm not that person, and I'm quite certain that they're no longer the people that I knew 40 years ago. Now, can we touch bases and catch up a little bit? Absolutely. But it's really hard to establish relationships when there's a 40-year gap, because often what happens is they continue to see you as the person that you used to be. Why do I bring this up? When you shift states, When you become a different person, the world without will remind you of who you used to be. And this is why Jesus would often say, when you're on the way to your manifestation, tell no person, tell no one. Why? Because they're going to remind you that, oh, you used to be sick. Stop, no. See, now I'm going to put them out. Give me a second, I got to put them out. Give me a second. There's two of them, and so the other one is kind of territorial. Give me a sec. See? No. Now, and of course, they're still carrying on, but I hope with the door being closed that it won't be as obvious to you. So people are going to remind you, like I said, Jesus would often say, when you're on the way to your manifestation, tell no person, because the temptation is if we say, well, I thought I changed, but nobody else is seeing the change. I might as well revert back to who it is that I used to be. Not so. You have to keep holding on, continue to occupy, we call it elite. You have to continue to embody living in the end. You can't embody living in the end for a few moments and say that this stuff doesn't work. I was talking to a coaching client some time back, and I had shared some things with her, and she made a shift immediately. And there was like this breakthrough, but the problem was we got off the coaching call. Now, we recorded the call. I like recording those calls because I want them to be able to go back and listen to and, really embody what it is that we're talking about. But she went back and immersed herself into her old ideology, her old belief system, her old programming. Good to see you. You'll be able to go back and get the rest of this in the recordings. As I was telling those on the call that because of weather, didn't know if I was going to be able to make it through. It looks like it's calmed down. Now the dogs are acting up, but that's fine. As long as you can hear me, that's all that's important. But you have to continuously, people give you the impression, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to make it clear so that you understand how this stuff works. There's nothing that you believe about yourself that just happened in a moment. There had to be, as it were, reinforcements of that belief. Whether you're a husband, you're an employee, your brothers, even those things we had to learn. Say that later on in life we discovered we had a new sibling or whatever. We started making connection, we started establishing relationships with them and so forth. My whole point is, no matter what it is that you do, it has to be reinforced. There's often the impression that people give you that you make the shift into the state, and that's all there is to it. But if you're not reinforcing that state, if you're not living in the end continuously, consistently, and persistently, you're going to, what we call in religious terms, backslide or fall back into your old way of thinking. So we're going to talk about some tools that will allow you to lock into state. This is important. And like I said, I know that people want to think that, and again, I understand it's programming. I understand that the stuff that you believe about money, about religion, about relationships, for the most part, have been handed down to you by other people. And what you do is get into these relationships, and then you discover your own dynamics, and you say, well, this is what I believe a relationship is. This is what I believe about money. This is what I believe about health, whatever. A lot of this stuff has been programmed for literally not hundreds, but thousands of years to keep you under the control of a system. Now, I'm not even saying that that's bad. It works for the most part. But when you start thinking outside the proverbial box, people are going to label you as strange, as peculiar. They're going to name call and so forth because you're no longer operating inside their proverbial box or what they believe that you should be doing, being, and having, and so forth. Now, why is this important? Those who have changed the world have always been of those who were not operating in what we call the norm. Why? Because if you're operating in the norm, when you're operating in what you call your norm, you can only get the results of the norm. You have to transcend, go beyond what it is that you believe that you are capable of, what it is that you believe, what you think about relationships, money, health, so forth. You start finding the evidence for that, you start changing, because now you have a different point of reference in this thing called reality. I was watching a program recently about Keanu Reeves, and they were talking about the Matrix, and they were saying that the Wachowskis, the partnership, the husband and wife, people that put the Matrix together, wanted to go deeper. They wanted to take the storyline in a different direction. But those who were paying the money said, no, we got to keep it at this surface level. We got to keep it at this educational level. And so for 20 years plus, Keanu Reeves has been silent about the meaning of the Matrix, and we take it to be, of course, computerized and things like that. And we took it to be futuristic, as it were. But the Matrix is happening now. Quantum mechanics, quantum physics, cybernetics, so forth, has proven that we're living in a matrix, a simulation, if you will. How this simulation works is that thought, it says in the beginning, who you are, God's, in the beginning of your day, your week, your month, your year, you think. I say think as opposed to speak because really we're talking the same thing. Speaking is thinking out loud and thinking is speaking very low. When you occupy and give your attention to something, because we're dealing in a matrix of sort, a holographic universe, a virtual reality, you start seeing the reflection. I talk about this on a weekly basis, but you start seeing the reflection of the evidence. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith, belief. Let's make it belief. So that, again, I want to take your mind away from, I need to say something like shit so that you don't think it's so religious. I got to shift your mind from religion. We're not talking religion. Bullshit. You understand what I'm saying? I was watching Mr. Rogers one day, and we'll talk about how I can control it. The biggest way that you control your thinking, there's a question, so I want to address it real quick. The biggest way that we all change our thinking, we get into a new state, and we're going to talk about this. Looks like my weather calmed down, is repetition. But there's some other tools, and I'm going to start putting other tools on the platform. Things like repetition, things like affirmations, things like visualization. All these tools help, but there's other tools that will allow you to get into the vibrational. We talk about it on a weekly basis. To him who has, to her who has, more shall be given. To him, her who has not, who's not holding the vibration. It's not even simply the thought. It's vibrating. So a lot of things that we're holding is at a much deeper level because of our predominant programming. And we say, well, I'm not programmed. No, we're all programmed. It's like I often say, the moment I start speaking about money, for example, all of a sudden people start popping off. Why? Because they've been programmed to believe that in talking about money, that it's wrong, that there's something wrong. Matter of fact, I just lost a person just now just by mentioning the word money. You understand what I'm saying? That's programming. When I start talking about religion, again, some people drop off because, again, they're programming. We're all programmed. The problem is most of us are buying into the programs that are not leading us to what it is that we want to be, do, or have. So because we're buying into programs that are not serving us, we're getting the results of those programs. But like I said, let's go on and get into the how, because I know that that's important for some of you and you want to take this away. Listen, Dr. Phil, you say, well, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. First, you have to observe your own inner conversation. You know, if you've listened to any of Mr. Lindel's talks, he will often talk about he was approached by a few young men, I think they were Mormons, and they were evangelizing. And so he asked one of the young men, he said, can you think your next thought? And the young man thought it was a strange question, and he pondered it for a while. He said, yeah, I can think my next thought. And Mr. Lindell says, well, I have a suggestion. Don't stop. Now, most people don't understand how profound what he said means. Most of us can't purposely think our own thoughts. We're operating from a legion of negativity. And that legion of negativity continues to show us the evidence of, I told you this stuff doesn't work. You can't trust the government. You know, all this stuff is fake. You understand what I'm saying? So that's the next thought. And because we're on autopilot, it says that we think anywhere from 60 to 70,000 thoughts. Good to see you. 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Probably more, probably less, depending upon the individual. Often those thoughts are repetitive. So often we're thinking the same thoughts over and over again, or we're looking for evidence of that same thought, belief system, so forth. We call that programming. We call those habits. We're running the same program over and over again, and we're continuously getting the exact same results. There was a movie, and for those who get an opportunity to see it, go online, whatever vehicle you're using, check out the movie, Groundhog Day. It's a movie, Bill Murray's the lead actor, and it's just a gentleman that got stuck in something that they were doing a Groundhog Day celebration, and he noticed every day he was reliving this Groundhog Day scenario. And what he started doing, because everything was happening the exact same way every day, he started changing things up. So he knew that, you know, a plate was going to drop and he would catch it, or he didn't catch it. He started doing different things in his day. This is how we make the shift. Most of us are on autopilot and we're living out a virtual Groundhog Day. And we say, well, you know, this is just who I am. This is my job. This is just life. And we believe that because that's what they want us to believe. If the masses believe that this is just life and they have no control of it, then they basically surrender to the powers that be. But you always have those few individuals they call rebels, whatever they name them. It's funny when people think outside the box, people start name calling you. A lot of times when I start speaking on some things, maybe spiritual or nature, whatever, all of a sudden I'm being called demonic, blah, blah, blah. People do that because they're scared and you're taking them beyond their comfort zone. So the only thing they can throw back at you is religious jargon or whatever it is that they believe at you. You got to understand that when if I feel something's false, how may I feel that it's real? You keep embodying it. Listen, at one point, you couldn't tie your shoes. So the belief that you could tie your shoes, I want to stay on this train of thought. The belief that you could tie your shoes at that moment was false. Now, that's an elementary example, but I guarantee you, if you're 15 years and older, there's things that you didn't believe that you could do at one point, but you kept doing it, you kept doing it. Now you do it without even thinking about it. At one point, you believed that being able to drive a car, now you wanted to do it and so forth, but where you were at the moment, it was false. There is no fiction. There is no false. It's that we haven't occupied the state long enough. You just haven't occupied that state. You haven't lived into that state long enough where it's become who you are. But you've lived in these other states so long that you believe that those are who you are. Your energy system, you're clothed in humanity. We've allowed humanity to dictate to us who we're to be, do, or have. The truth of the matter is you're supposed to be dictating to humanity. Say you want to be wealthy. Let's just use wealth. You know, I may lose a couple people with money talk. But let's use wealth. You start learning everything you can about Bitcoin. You start teaching about Bitcoin. You start making some investments in Bitcoin. 5-10 years out, you're the Bitcoin expert. Now you're worth not hundreds of thousands, but you're worth now literally millions, if not billions. When you first started thinking about that, it was a false belief about, I'm going to become wealthy. The problem that I have within the community is people give you the impression the only thing you have to do is think about it. You have to think about it, then you have to be about it. Neville called that living in the end, and that's what we're talking about today. I had a false belief that I was going to relocate from California to Atlanta, Georgia. There was no way humanly possible where I was at the moment that was going to take place. Didn't have the finances, didn't have the means to make the transition. It started off as fiction. I continued to live out, and then a chain of events took place that started shifting the fiction into what we call reality. It's only a false belief, as you call it, because you don't believe it's true. And that's one of your main problems right now, why the manifestation of the materialization isn't happening. When you get to the place not knowing the how, you're not going to, there's certain things that you've decided, and I'm speaking to each one of you. There's certain things that you decided that you were going to do today, for example. You didn't know how those things were going to play out. You just made a decision, I'm going to get this done. And you went about making the decisions and taking the actions to make that happen. This is how all manifestation takes place, small or great. Most of us are still occupied by the belief that this is fantasy, or this is a false ideal, or this is make-believe. This can't really happen. Bill Gates, or whomever you want to put in that slot, didn't start off as a billionaire. They started off with an ideal. They couldn't even know where that ideal was going to take them. Bill Gates had no clue. At one point, he was going to be the wealthiest man in the world. No clue. He was trying to do what it was that he loved. He loved computers. You know, even the little bit that he and Paul Allen knew about computers, they just delved into computers. They made an investment and brought somebody's DOS system, a down and dirty or something. They had a name for it, but those who know. And they purchased that software for about $25,000, I think $25,000 to $50,000, but I think it was $25,000. They reached out to IBM, and IBM said, do you have some type of operating system that we can use? They said, yeah, we have one, we can sell it to you. They said, well, no, we don't want to buy it, we'll license it from you, blah, blah, blah. IBM didn't know what they were passing on. Anyway, that 50 years ago was the founding of Microsoft. It started off with an idea. Bill Gates had no clue that he was going to become one of the wealthiest people in the world with that concept. Matter of fact, like I said, he didn't even have the concept. They just wanted to work with computers. They wanted to be, one thing that Bill Gates did understand though, because everybody else was looking at the hardware, Bill Gates said the money's going to be in the software. And so that's what they focused on. Everybody else at that time was focusing on the computers and everything else. Like that time, most of us believe that the power is in the software, or what we call reality. The power is between here, between your two ears. It's your thinking. That controls the hardware, or what we call reality. So first and foremost, you got to examine your inner conversations, even in changing. So the question was asked, how do I take what's false and turn it to real? First and foremost, you got to believe it's real. You got to make the shift in your, you got to make the shift and understand this. This stuff called reality isn't real. It's a reflection. I say this each week, but the reality, it says belief, and I'm using the word belief as opposed to faith. Belief is the substance. Belief is the substance of things hoped for, in the evidence of things not seen. Quantum mechanics if you see the bleep in other programs, what the bleep is what it was called, it tells you that what we observe, what we look at, the second we give it our attention, it materializes. To us, that sounds like fantasy, but you got to understand that mind creates the reality. Forget about me, forget about all the stuff that I'm saying at the moment. Forget about all that. Think about all the stuff in your life. I want that new car. I want that new home. I want those clothes. I want those sneakers. The sneakers didn't come first. The clothes didn't come first. The car didn't come first. The house didn't come first. The relationship didn't come first. The better health didn't come first, or the poor health didn't come first. The lack didn't come first. You understand what I'm saying? The thought about those things came first. I want you to get. You guys are doing this all the time. You keep thinking that you need some better method or some magical formula. You just need to start thinking right. Thinking in accordance to what it is, and you keep thinking and start living from elite states, embody living in the end. Start living as that person. Now, the question is, how can I turn a false belief real? You turn a false belief real by believing first and foremost that it's real. It takes reality. It says that all seeds have their own appointed time. It takes reality a moment to catch up with your thinking. Nobody plants a seed is a wonderful analogy. Nobody plants a seed in the ground and believes that, like Jack and a beanstalk, that seed's going to reproduce overnight. That's rarely the case. It takes reality of the germination of that seed, the germination of your ideals, a moment to catch up. So the thing that you believe is false, first and foremost, start believing that it's real. Not that it's real because it's materialized, but because it's real as an ideal. As you begin to believe, I'm going to become a multimillionaire. Let's say that that's the story. Now you go about, okay, what does it require for me to become a multimillionaire? Don't get into the silence, just I'm gonna be a multimillionaire, you're gonna be broke. Now, can money often show up? Absolutely. But it's not going to take you to you're not going to become a multimillionaire simply by being in the silence. You go into the silence, Spirit's going to give you some things to do. You come out of the silence and you start doing. Next week, we're going to talk about how materializing money. But you come out of the silence and you do what's been given to you to do. It was said of Moses, do what it is that you saw in the mountain when he came down and he was to tell the children of Israel what to do and how to build the tabernacles and so forth. The tabernacle is symbolic of yourself. The Moses is those quantum seeds within you, the revelation that's in you, that's being outpictured into reality. So divine intelligence in you says, do what you saw in the high place. Do what you saw in your imagination. You go into the silence to get the blueprint. When you get the blueprint of what you've been given to do in the silence, you may wake up one morning and all of a sudden you get this great idea. Like, man, I can't believe that's given to me. That's your $1 million idea. Now go act on it. We're taught in this society, lift not a finger. You lift not a finger and you don't do anything, you're going to be broke. That's the bottom line. People can tell you, and the people that are telling you this are working 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 14 hours, 16-hour days. They're not working because they're loving what it is that they're doing, but they're telling you, well, I'm not lifting the finger. They're working their ass off. I'm being real with you. The creators that you see with the 100,000 followers, the 1 million followers, and whatever the number is, they're busting their butts. And then they're going to tell you, lift not a finger. I'm being real with you. You do what you've been given, and I lost some people on that one. It's okay. It's not for them. Listen, you can't. Neville was one of the hardest working people. Joseph Murphy was one of the hardest working people. Neville spoke almost 300 days out of the year, if not more. Often his wife was left alone in the hospital and he's calling her from his hotel or wherever it was that he was speaking from. Didn't have a relationship with his son. Never talks about his son after his son went into the military. Why is it? He talked about Victoria. There was a severed relationship. You can't do this work and have some collateral damage. I'm being real, you're gonna have some collateral damage. It's not a bad thing, but everybody's not meant to be on your journey. When you step into your power, you're going to lose some people. The question was, how important is meditation when you're on this journey? You're meditating all the time. What I'm asking you to do is be more purposeful in what it is when you're in your quiet time. My meditation often happens first thing in the morning. I'll wake up at the 3 o'clock hour, the 4 o'clock hour, 4 in the morning, and things are given to me. Then I'll start doing some research. I'll start getting on my phone, start looking up some things. Meditation, don't make it mystical and all that stuff. It's you getting quiet so that you can hear what Spirit has to say. It was said of the master teacher that he would often break off and spend time with Father. It's you shutting out the noise. Mr. Lindo tells the story that when he first started getting into this, he would go into the bathroom and he would wad up some toilet paper and put it in his ear so that he could get quiet. You getting quiet is very important because there's so much noise. When you're scrolling through, the different platforms and all that stuff, you're being bombarded by a legion of noise all the time. Sometimes it requires that you get silent so that you can hear your inner small voice, your inner knower, that new ideal that you're looking for, that concept. Say it's relationship, say it's health. This is what's going to happen. You say, I want to be in a loving relationship. I want to be in better health. I want more money. You're going to start giving your attention to that. Jesus said this, make friends with unrighteous mammon, money, so that you will be welcomed into the eternal habitation. What is it that you want to be to have? That's the eternal habitation. If you want to be welcomed in, you start giving your attention to. You can't say, well, I want to make more money, but I hate money. You can't say I want to be in a loving relationship, but you don't practice the art of loving people. You can't say I want to be in better health and you have poor diets. And listen, I love sugars, I love salts, I love flours. I do all that stuff, but I do it in moderation. My wife purchased this bag of candy bars. She said, I didn't know it was going to be that big. I'm like, okay, I got to practice some discipline here. Do we eventually become aware of if you start getting, the question was, do we eventually become aware of immortality, who we are as spiritual beings? When you start getting into going into the silence and you start meditating on who you are, and you understand that the energy that you're using to manifest, to materialize, is spirit. This life force you call spirit, energy, body, the body clothes your energy system. You're thinking, this stuff that nobody can see. When you realize and you start focusing on, that's God. I'm not talking religion. You can't live, move, exist apart from the infinite intelligence known as God. You can't. It's impossible. If you're breathing, you're part of that source. If you're talking, if you're watching this program, you're part. It doesn't require a religious membership. It doesn't require a religious membership. Just by you existing, you're part of the infinite intelligence known as God. Now, as the Legion, the man that we talked about, so some of you are going to have to go back. Carrie, I'm glad you asked that question. I have a problem with being a recluse. Let me say this. I'm going to let this lesson go over. So, because I'm like 5 minutes out before I normally close in an hour, I'm going to let it go over. Because it's a very powerful lesson. There's some things I want to give you. And I don't want to repeat it next week because I really want to get into the subject of manifesting money next week. And my thunderstorm has quieted down for those who saw it lightening up and so forth. Thank you. So the question is, do you have to be a recluse? Do you have to go? It was easy for me to be super spiritual I'll touch on that in a second. Somebody was saying that it's hard for me to get into the realization that I'm God's. You can't be otherwise. And think about this. I'll touch on it, then I get back to Carrie about the recluse. Is it hard now you look at a body of ocean of water. You take a thimble of that ocean of water, it's still a part of that ocean of water. Likewise with you. You're not the God, but you're made up of the same. It says, let us make, this is allegory, but it's true. We've been created in the image and the likeness of this infinite intelligence known as God. We're spiritual beings. It says that God is spirit, and those who must worship him must worship him, he, she, in spirit and in truth. Spirit has no sexual orientation. We use that for men's understanding, but we call God Father, but spirit has no sexual orientation. It's impossible to be spirit and have a sexual orientation. But we say God Father, so bear with me as I use God Father. So bear with me. But the thing was, it's hard for me to believe that I'm God. That's the benefit. You asked the question about going into the silence. Then you go into the silence, you start meditating and saying, Father, Mother, God, whatever you call that infinite intelligence known as God, energy, source, life force. Reveal yourself in me. Show me who I am. And this is not about the magic forms that I think something magically it pops up the next day. I think about $1 million and it pops up the next day. We're not talking, you're doing this on various levels anyway. When you think about going to the store and you pick up a couple of items, that's manifestation. Because we do that, and you don't really realize how much energy that takes to do something like that. But because we do that on autopilot and we don't think anything about it, but think what happens. You think it's okay, I need milk. Now, milk doesn't exist in your reality at that moment. So it could be milk, money, anything, but let's use milk because milk is something that we can identify with. I need milk, okay. I also need, to get some fruits, vegetables, whatever. You think about going through this process and then you carry about the means, you get in your car, you walk with, so you're taking this earth suit called a body and you're directing it by spirit and saying, okay, glass of water, same thing. And you go down and you get the glass of water, you think nothing about it. That was manifestation. You're doing this morning, noon, and night. But then you say, how can I take in something that's false and make it real? A glass of water, before you materialized the glass of water, was false. Till you went downstairs and got the glass of water. You say, well, all the things were in place to do that. All the things are in place to do whatever it is that you want to be or have. If it's not in place, then that's not going to be something that you're going to give your attention to. But when you start imagining it, when Leonardo da Vinci thought about a flying machine, everything that was needed to make a flying machine existed, but they hadn't taken the ore and all the stuff that was required, the electricity, but it already existed in the earth. Otherwise, we couldn't create it. There's things that we create on the earth realm that we require the things from the earth, from the physical reality to create it. It's only a falsehood because right now at this moment, you believe that it's a falsehood. So, but you're manifesting all the time. Now, I want to go back to what Carrie was inquiring about, just being a recluse. I understand that there's people that do that. Before I got married, I was, almost like 38 years old. I kind of wanted to do things right and so forth. You can do all the work and still, not do everything perfect. But I used to say this, being really spiritual, I used to do these Bible studies and so forth. And I would say, even the wrong one becomes the right one when you say I do. That stuff is great in theory. But when reality starts hitting you in the face because you've made some poor decisions, then you basically recalculate, your belief system. A lot of people talk about manifestation, materialization, and so forth, from a theory level. And when you're talking about using Neville's principles or whatever from a theory level, all of it sounds perfect. But then you step into reality and you attract your SP and you're like, this woman's causing me hell. Something's wrong. All of the stuff, it's like going to school. You go to school and you become a doctor. Then they start practicing. You go to school and you become an attorney. Then you start practicing. All the stuff that you use and learn in law of attraction, law of assumption, all manifestations, all of it's good in theory, but then you got to put some leather behind it, some shoe leather. You got to start walking it out. You got to start living it out. And a lot of times when you start living certain things out, they don't always look like Neville Goddard's experience. They don't always look like Joe Dispenza's experience. They don't always look like Joseph Murphy's experience, but they're going to be uniquely yours. And that's okay. But you got to walk through the illusion to get to the other side. Now, we're talking about being a recluse. I brought the thing about saying the wrong one becomes the right one. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do when you're off by yourself and there's nobody bothering you. But that's tested when you step back. We're connected. I think sometimes my personal opinion, that the most selfish thing that a person can do sometimes is have all this wealth of knowledge. And they're somewhere in the Himalayas and they're not sharing it with anybody and they just have this knowledge for themselves. I don't believe that knowledge and wisdom and insight is given just for us. You go into the silence, you become a recluse to learn the lessons, but then you come back and you share those lessons with the world so that the world can benefit from what it is that you know. So are there times that I go into the silence and it's just me time? Absolutely. But at the end of the me time is to come together as we time and me sharing the insights, the wisdoms, the things that have been given to me on my personal journey. Yours is going to be totally different, but then you share those things. So the question is, do we do this just to become a recluse? You can do whatever it is that you want. That's yours given to do. But if you're looking at impacting the world, the way that happens is you learn the lessons in the silence, then you share it in open. Now, the benefit of learning it in the silence and then sharing it in the open is we discover what it is that we truly believe when we're getting pushback, when we share a message that's contrary to what most of the world believes. What it does, though, is cement us into what it is that we already know. When you're being tested, it's easy to say, well, I'll give my life for you. It's different when you're actually on that front line giving your life for somebody. You understand what I'm saying? So it's wonderful to talk about theories and principles and everything else. But eventually, we have to experience it. And a lot of times when the experience happens, we say, this stuff doesn't work. The stuff absolutely does work. But you have to go through the valley of the shadow of illusion, or what some deem as death. And I don't mean physical death. I'm talking about this virtual reality called life. This thing that's dying, decaying, not here permanent, not eternal. When you go through that, it's going to test what it is that you say that you believe. You say, I want to be a millionaire. First hardship comes up. First challenge comes up. Oh, I'm not going to be a millionaire. That stuff's too tough. You didn't want to be a millionaire. Life's going to test what it is that you say that you want. And for those who persevere to the end, they shall be saved. I'm not talking about a religious salvation. I'm talking about you're going to experience the salvation of what it is that you want to be, do, or have. And then people are going to come to you and say, how did you do that? You understand? Most people are not willing to go through the valley of the shadow of illusion to get on the other side of the trials, the tribulations, and so forth that they go through in this thing called reality, and to keep their mind straight and say, this is who I'm being, regardless. No matter what's happening on the without, I'm doing this thing. When you come from that, there's no falsehood. It's just reality catching up with you in what it is that you've decreed shall come to pass. But let me see if I got, okay, so let go. I said it earlier, but I want to touch on it again. When There's a conflict between willpower and imagination. 100% of the time, imagination is going to win out. Why is that important? When you start imagining and believing that what it is, no matter what the world says around you, how crazy it is, whatever, but when you start living from your imagination, not trying to force it to happen, not trying to make it happen, but knowing that it's already happened, I'm just going through the process. How many of you have watched a movie? Quick analogy. Now, you've watched the movie before, but you love the movie so much that you wanted to watch it again. You watch the movie a second time. Now, you know the actual events, even though you're still feeling the same emotions, you're still having this. Some things are even heightened because you already anticipate what's going to happen. All the world's a stage, as said by Shakespeare, and all the people are just merely actors upon that stage. I try to press upon you that what you're imagining, what you're believing, what you're faithing is the substance. Reality is the mirror of what it is that you believe. So if you believe that what it is that you're seeing is false, reality is going to give you the evidence that this stuff is false and it's not real. But when you know that you know that you know, there's certain things I got to do today. There's not even a doubt that they're going to get done. I did my little workout. I know I was going to get on this talk with you guys. Even though that hadn't, when I thought about it, it was a falsehood. There was 100 reasons I could have said, it's raining outside, blah, 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 and I not got on the talk. But for me, it was real. So this is why we're speaking right now in this moment. Some of you determine, I'm going to get on Coach DeCarlo's talk. I'm going to plug in because I know he's going to be there Sunday, and I want to hear what he has to say today. So for you, that falsehood, because for many other people, it's still a falsehood. It didn't happen. But for you, the falsehood became reality. Now you're seeing the reflection, getting the benefit of being on the call. This is how reality works, but it always starts in your mind. We've been taught the reverse, and we said, make believe, fantasizing, but that's those who know, and they understand the power of their thoughts, so they start giving their attention to what it is that they want, not what they don't want, because they know that they both create. The man that was demon possessed was focusing on what he didn't want. Then the master teacher, I am, salvation, what it is that you want, he started helping the man see what it was that he wanted. And all those negative other things fell off into reality, the swine. Okay, so let go of how. Yours is not the business of how your manifestation, materialization is going to show up. Your job, faith, belief, is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Your job is to get the picture. I got to get you to get this. This is not fantasy stuff. This is stuff that they teach at CIA understands it. I mean, go out and look up the CIA document. But how mind stuff and how mind works and so forth. They did research, and the person that was doing the research came to the conclusion that mind, CIA now, this is not DeCarlo and Fantasy Island, that mind creates reality, not the other way around. We've got it twisted. We've got the tail wagging the dog. We think that, who's in office and all this stuff. Decide what it is that you want to be, do, or have. Start focusing and giving your attention. Start finding out who you need to become to make that happen. Start living out from that person. It's going to show up as your reality. Okay, so, but to let go of the how. Yours is to become who it is. You start educating yourself. You start finding out what that person knows, who she is, what they do, and you start becoming that person. All of a sudden, the world's going to start acquiescing and start acknowledging you as the person that you already believed yourself to be. Okay. Now, you got to integrate all this stuff that I'm talking about. When you start integrating what it is that you know to be, do, or have, not the how. You start just living from, and your living from could, okay, I want to be a coach. You take a coaching course. I want to learn about AI. You start finding out everything you can about AI. Start one program. Figure that one program out. Go to the next program. I want to make more money. Okay, what are some ways that I can make money? Start looking up ways to. What's going to happen though? The gate the floodgates of heaven are going to be opened up. It says, test me here and see if I will not open up the floodgates of heaven. It's talking about giving. So I'm saying, don't give a tithe, give your attention. What you give your attention to, you're going to see more evidence of that. Give your attention to what it is that you want to be, do, or have. Health. You start looking, okay, how can I be healthy? What diet can I take on here? We like to believe that if we just believe it, then miraculously our body's going to change, but we're abusing our body. But I'm thinking positive thoughts, yeah, I'm eating candy bars every day. I'm not eating fruits and vegetables. I'm not hydrating myself. Lifestyle always mirrors what we truly believe. If you're not taking care of your temple, then you don't believe in that being beneficial. If you're not learning what it is that you need to learn about making money, then you're saying, I want to make money, but at your core, that's not what you really believe. Your lifestyle, it says, what's said in secret will be shouted on the housetop. Again, that's an allegory. What it's saying is that what you say in your imagination is going to show up in your life. Jesus called it fruit. What you truly believe is going to show up in your life. If you want that to change, then you start doing what's required. And again, you say, well, how do we do it? You can go out. I got a $9 package out there. I'm not making a hard sell about the $9 package, but if you think it's going to be beneficial, it's going to give you some tools in the book Quantumetics, how a whole bunch of tools. And a lot of these tools are repetitive. Why? It's repetitive because I know that's how we learn. And this has been proven by science, technology, my industry when I've been in technology and so forth. It happens by way of repetition. So what it is, where we're at the moment is what we've given our thoughts to predominantly. Where you're going to be in the future is going to be determined by what it is that you're giving your thoughts to from this moment on forward. You learn tools. You learn to get in vibration. So begin by practicing right now the disposition, the attitudes, the states of the person that you want to be, do, or have. That means you probably will need to educate yourself on money, loving relationships, better health. Whatever it is that you want, start learning about that. Why are you learning about that? Right now, you don't have anything to pull from because you don't have that information. You're at a state of unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. You start pulling and you start gathering that information, then you get to a state of conscious incompetence. Oh, I didn't know that before, but now I know it now. Then you get to a state of conscious competence, that you get proficient in what it is that you've given your attention to on a persistent basis. You start becoming that person. Like driving a car. We can go through the stages of driving a car and we can know that this is true. Lastly, you get to a state of unconscious competence. This is when you're doing it and you don't even think about it. Most of us, we want a pill. We want a message. And we want that message to give us what we need at that moment to transform our whole life. The message is the catalyst. It's the starting point. But then you have to begin sowing the seeds of the attitudes, the dispositions of the person that you want to be, do, or have. And then you can't do this for a few moments and say, well, listen, I've done this for 3 weeks and it's not working. That's the wrong attitude. It's like most of us at the beginning of the year. We get on a health program. So by April, most of the people that got onto a fitness program, they're going to change their life, they're going to start getting fit, blah, blah, blah. By April, all that stuff is wiped out. That's because they were trying to do it by way of willpower. I'm saying use your imagination. Start seeing yourself. This is who I am. I worked out this morning when it was uncomfortable because, first of all, I like working out, but it's who I am. I don't even have to think about it. It's just me getting down there and doing it. I ate oatmeal. I love oatmeal. I put berries in my oatmeal, so if I had oatmeal this morning. I love oatmeal. You understand what I'm saying? That may have not always been the case, but when you do something long enough, it becomes habitual. So what happened with the man that had the legion, he was giving his attention to the things that he didn't want to be, do, or have, and that's what kept showing up in his life. You also have a legion of possibilities. But depending upon what you're giving your attention to consistently, persistently on a given period of time, that's what's going to start showing up in your life most often. I can know what's been given your attention in the past by what you're experiencing at the moment. Can't be otherwise. Lifestyle always mirrors what we ultimately believe. But then you go and you step fully into your embodiment. So the next thing that we're going to talk about briefly is you step into. Now, you're a spiritual being, energy being, vibrational being, having a human experience. I keep saying this because this is relevant. You can clothe spirit in a legion of possibilities, and I'm saying an infinite amount of possibilities. Now, we've been programmed, again, it's going back to the program, we've been programmed to believe that if I start pretending that I'm this other person, I'm a fraud. No. You're acting as a fraud because right now you believe that you're less than the creator that you are. You can clothe spirit into any. This is the key that most people don't want you to know, those who know. You can clothe your spirit in any ideology, any belief system. I was a skinny kid, less than 130 pounds, probably less than 125 pounds, and I wanted to be a Marine. I stepped into Marine Corps boot camp. I was so skinny that they gave me double rations. Double rations mean when you go to eat, they give you double. And so they would give me double rations, but I had to eat the double rations as fast as the person that only had one ration, but that was to bulk me up, help me put on some weight. But I believed that I could be a Marine. When talk to people before going in, you're not going to be no Marine, you're not. You understand what I'm saying? But I clothed myself in the possibilities that I could be a Marine. Money came. I clothed myself. I'm juicing now. I love juicing. I clothed myself in the possibility of making more than minimum wage. I clothed myself in millions of dollars coming into my life. You understand what I'm saying? When we make the decision, you're not going to, let me say this, you're not going to know the how. But what's going to happen is evidence will start showing up. Opportunities will start showing up for you to act upon. Now, all of them are not going to, once you get into that mindset, you're going to have a legion of possibilities to step into. You're going to have to do some contemplation, some meditation. You're going to have to decide. You're going to even test some out and say, oh, that wasn't for me. That's okay. Learn quick. Increase your failure rate. Why do I say, because people, we're fearful of failure. Increase your failure rate. What does that mean? Fail fast. Find out if something's, when you're talking about opportunities, business, blah, blah, learn quickly when you step into the thing, okay, is this thing for me? You're going to see certain things that are going to jump out at you. Okay, it may be the people that you're working at, whatever. But certain things are going to show up. You're going to say, it may be, okay, that investment is not an investment I'm willing to make at this moment. That's okay. Then you go into the next thing. But you're going to find eventually that thing that resonates with you. Then all of a sudden, people are going to call you an overnight success. And they're not going to know the journey that you went to become that success. I spoke of Keanu Reeves recently, and the man has gone through so much. And we look at his life and we say, man, if I could only be that person. Years ago, people used to say, I wish I was Michael Jackson. I'm like, no, I don't wish that I was Michael Jackson, because you got to understand this. The thing that you're wishing, good, bad, or indifferent, you got to experience the things that those people go through. Even like in your own life, there's people that wish that they could be you, but they don't know what you've gone through to become you. People don't know what I've gone through to become DiCarlo. Take your journey and make it the best possible journey. Be the best version of you. So, embody. I want to touch on this briefly. Like I said, I'm already over the time, but I want to touch on embody because I think that this is a lot of confusion for a lot of people. Coach, how do I embody? Somebody asked earlier, how do I become that person? Right now, you believe that you're somebody, and I'm not discounting who it is that you believe that you are. I believe that I'm somebody, and there's certain things that I believe about who it is. Get to know spirit, absolutely. And even saying get to know spirit, for those who don't opt, I didn't get to know spirit overnight. True self overnight. There's things that we go through and we get quiet. Your true self is infinite. And I know that this is hard for us to grasp because we think our true self is the ego self. I've tried to say it in various ways. You can clothe who you believe you are is who's going to keep showing up. When you change the belief, just simply saying, I can be somebody else. I can be a business owner, for example. I can be in a loving relationship. I can have better health. Just simply saying that will begin to change the dynamics of who it is that you are. Just simply by believing that you can be somebody else. When I was living in Ohio and I was making less than minimum wage, and like I said, I told a story that we worked in a hospital, and there was a man, he probably was like 65, but it looked like it was like 90 to us. And so we thought he was like 100 years old. But Miller had been working in the hospital for like 30, 40 years, and he was making like 13 and 16 dollars an hour. But for us as kids, we thought that was more money than we could ever imagine. We could not imagine making, let's say $15 an hour. It's like Queen Latifah on the movie Set It Off. She's on the top of a hill looking down at a plant. She's like, man, if I can get that joint, if I can start working now, I can make $15 an hour. Can you imagine what I can do $15 an hour? That's where I was. But then I desired more. I saw what was going on in the environment around me. I was very discontent in what I was seeing. And I started believing that there was something more. And so I started going about. I started, first of all, went to Ohio State University. I was dealing with some dynamics at home, couldn't stay there. I said, okay, well, let me look at the military. I said, if I'm either going to be smart, or I'm going to be strong. I decided to be strong. Violet, I'm going to say this. You're further ahead than most people are spiritually. So in saying that they can see who they can be in their mind, a lot of times we got to go through a process. Most people, because we've been so indoctrinated with this thing called reality, and we believe that ego has given us identity. We believe that ego is who we are. We don't know right now, but you're going to learn. We don't know right now that I can clothe ego in a legion of possibilities. That this thing that I believe that I am, that's not who I am, and I can change it at any given moment. We have to get there. Most people aren't there because they believe that who they are at the moment is fixed. Most of the people that will see this talk believe that who they are is fixed. They believe genetics. They believe how they grew up. They believe family of origin. They believe their skin color. They believe their sexual orientation. They believe their height. They believe all these different things about who it is that they are. And none of these things really totally solidify who you are. That's the suit that you're wearing, that's the suit that you have spirit clothed in, but it's not who you are. Spirit. So this is why a person can be broke one day, and in a very short period of time, they start thinking differently, and they can come into wealth. This is why a person could be, I saw this metamorphosis when I was in middle school, and it was one of the teachers, I think she was like in history or whatever. She was extremely overweight. She was probably like 350 pounds, but she was a beautiful person. And I started seeing this transformation, and all of a sudden that weight just started dropping off. And so by the end of that school year, that person that was like 350 pounds was like maybe like 130 pounds. Now, of course, she had other things she had to deal with, like skin and things like that, but she dropped that weight. She was a different person. People started approaching her differently. She had a shift in consciousness. We call this in the Christian experience being born again, but you're being born again every moment of the day. You see something that you didn't know before. All of a sudden, it plants a new concept, a new ideal in your mind. You're not the same person at that point that you were a moment ago. Every time you take on new information, new ideas come into your mind, you start thinking from a different perspective. You're being remade. But because everything outwardly appears to be the same, we think that we're the exact same person. None of us are the same people that we were even at the beginning of the year. We believe that we are, but we're not. Everybody's making these shifts moment by moment. We just don't realize it. So the shifts that you think that you're not making, the strides that you think that you're not making, you are making. Simply by listening to this talk, you're not going to leave the same person. You're going to be practicing some of the same ideologies and so forth, but you're going to have new information. You're going to be like, oh, if I start changing my thinking, I get into a new frequency. Absolutely. You get into a new vibration. Now all of a sudden, especially like from the talk next week when we start talking about money, how money works, you're going to see yourself as, oh, I can manifest money. I can, because money is not the green stuff. Money is the mind stuff. When you start believing that you can manifest money and you start sending money in it and you start coming up with creative ideas and you start coming from a place of worthiness, oh, I'm worthy for people to pay me for this great idea that I've come up with. When you shift your identity of what you believe about money, I went from less than minimum wage to a six-figure income simply by a shift in identity. It didn't happen overnight. It took me going through stages. It doesn't require that we go through stages, but for me, it required that I went through stages. You understand what I'm saying? When you start taking on new ideology, new information, and you incorporate that into your belief system, you've changed. But you don't think that you've changed because all outward experience appears to be the same. But so embody by start believing, by start practicing, living from, as Violet just stated, that new reality. Let me go to the last point here. Heaven, the word heaven means expanse. There's a term that says, if I be lifted up, I would draw all manifestation. It says all men, but I use the term manifestation unto me. When you're lifted up in consciousness, when you get to the place that you know, that you know, that you know, that you know, you're going to start drawing that knowing to you. Now, the knowing may take graduation. Some of you may get it in a moment. Click. Oh, I know I can do $1 million now. I know that the ideas and the concepts and the stuff that I've learned over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I can turn it into a $1 million empire. Be it unto you according to your faith. Yes, the question was, certainly would be helpful. It says in ancient texts, you can't pour old wine into new bottles. You're the bottle. As you start pouring new information into you, whether it be through watching videos, reading, audio programs, and you start implementing those things, you start living from those things. Most of us, even in what we've listened to about Neville Goddard, his stories, his anecdotes, and so forth, that was new information at one point. And for many of us, I know it was for me, it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was hard for me to even receive what it was that Neville was talking about because it was just so out there. But as I continued to do it often and repeatedly, it became my own conversation. I started talking in the dialect that, like many of us in the community of Neville Goddard, like the things that Neville said. Just like if you're in a religious community, whether it be Christian, Muslim, Buddhism, whatever, atheists, I'm sure there's conversations that they have. My whole point is, once you start indoctrinating yourself with that new ideology and you start taking on the belief systems, you're going to start experiencing the more money, the better health, the loving relationships, whatever it is that you want. But there's some other things, but at a surface level, you got to start there. There's things about, going into, as it were, and get into a vibrational state and frequencies and things like that. And I'll talk about those things later. But you got to start pouring the new information. But don't just be a hearer of the new information. Be a doer. Implement it. Trial, error, figure it out. Find out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Your journey isn't going to be the same as everyone else's journey. Nor like Violet was saying that Neville or whomever isn't in her favor. Hers may be Bob Proctor. It doesn't matter the teacher. Let me say this in closing. It's like you got Jenny Craig, you got Weight Watchers, you got Curve, you got the Atkins diet, you got keto. They all work. They all work if you work on them. It doesn't matter which one you get on. Joseph Murphy, Joe Dispenza, Wayne Dyer, Neville Goddard, they all work. It just depends on which one you utilize. It doesn't matter There's a whole bunch of trains or vehicles that will get you to your destination. You got to find out the vehicle, whether it be a plane, a car, walking, skipping. You got to find out what works best for you and then implement. You can't just be an observer and just keep watching life pass you by. You got to clothe yourself in the life, become that person, start living from that person. That's what living from the in means. It means occupying and living from that new person. So get into the place of whomever resonates with you and live from that state, become that person. And no matter who the teacher is, no matter what the program is, when you start doing it, it's going to become uniquely yours. So even though you got principles and things like that, you're going to discover your own pathway and the things that work uniquely for you, the thing that got you the level of success that you have. So we're going to wind down with that right there. But the biggest thing is decide who you want to be and start living from that person. Find out as much as you can about that new identity. Clothe yourself in it. Learn as much as you can. As you start learning about it, you're going to start being about it. You can't take in that new information and not have some changes in your life. It's almost automatic. Just pour the information and start living from what it is that you want to be, do, or have. I love you guys. I went into 90 minutes today. Like I said, I normally would cut that an hour, but I wanted to cover all of this. Love you. And like I said, we'll be talking about money and how money works and how to attract money into your life next week. I'm glad it was helpful. Love you guys, and we'll talk next week. Have a great one.